Everybody ready? All right. Good morning, everyone. I am joined today with Brian Johnson of the University of Maryland, the lead researcher on the report I will discuss, along with Robert Morgan and Calvin Robinson Bay from the Caucus of African American Leaders, Public Safety Committee, and Daphne Olson of Mothers of Murdered Sons and Daughters United, and Reverend Kobe Little, president of the Baltimore City NAACP. Today we are announcing the publication of a report on racial disparities in the criminal justice system. In the summer of 2019, Brian and his colleagues at UMD approached our office about doing a report on racial disparities in the criminal justice system. As the city's top prosecutor, I believe in transparency, and I believe in the need for reform. I recognize and have often discussed the racial disparities in the criminal justice system, and as one of the few Black female prosecutors that represent 1% of all elected prosecutors in the country, I know all too well the inequities that exist when it comes to the criminal justice system. Much of this report makes for uncomfortable reading, but it should serve as a wake-up call to the city of Baltimore and to this nation. While I'm pleased that the report concludes that there is little evidence of overarching or systemic patterns of racial disparity in the prosecution of felony cases by my office, I am troubled by the overrepresentation of Black people in felony cases. Such racial inequities that permeate the criminal justice system in our city have motivated me to implement reforms that reduce systemic racial disparities and allow us as an office to focus on serious offenses. We must ensure justice is applied fairly regardless of race, sex, religion, gender, or class. The authors began their research in 2019. The report covers the period from 2017 through to 2018. Since that period, I've taken the following steps to reduce understanding, even before we got the report, that racial disparities exist. In January 2019, my office stopped prosecuting marijuana possession cases. In the decade prior to the policy, Baltimore City had the largest rate of disparities among marijuana possession cases and arrests, with Black people almost 6 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana than that of whites, even though there was no disparity in the usage. From 2014 to 2018, we had 1,468 marijuana possession cases. Last year, the police made only 5 marijuana arrests, all of which were dismissed by my office. In March of 2020, my office stopped prosecuting a range of minor offenses, including sex work and drug possession, offenses that typically tie individuals, Black individuals, and people in the criminal justice system. An estimated 443 new drug paraphernalia and possession and prostitution arrests were averted as a result of the no prosecution policy. That amounts to a 78% of which were averted in the Black community as a result of those policies. And a Johns Hopkins study concluded that the policies had no impact on public safety, with the target population being less than 1% of those that had recidivated and committed another offense. In December of 2020, my office opened a new unit to review and to reduce lengthy sentences. The unit has released, thus far, 30 individuals, all of whom are Black. In 2019, the average number of people who entered the criminal justice system was 23,244. In 2021, the number has dropped 41% and is now 13,645. The number of people incarcerated in prison in Baltimore City sentenced individuals has dropped from 3,952 people at the start of my term in 2014 and 15 to 552 at the end of 2021, an almost 800% reduction. Variables for these 2 data points include the low-level policies, COVID, the consent decree, and other factors. But more importantly, have everything to do with the policies that we've implemented. My office has, despite the disinformation that has been perpetuated in the city of Baltimore, maintained a 90% conviction rate on average for violent offenses, a 92% conviction rate for violent repeat offenders, all of which are consistent with the conviction rates of my predecessor over the past 10 years. The office has also exonerated 12 innocent men, all of whom were black, that collectively served 300 years in prison for crimes they did not commit. I'm also delighted to announce, in conjunction with this report, a new campaign from our office called The Many Faces of Justice. I know that justice comes in many forms, and the campaign will contain videos that illustrate the many people impacted by the office's fervent commitment to delivering justice for everyone. The campaign will include video stories from victims of crime who have worked with the office to secure justice, people who have benefited from our victim services, people who have benefited from our second chance programs through our diversion programs, and stories from people who support our approach to low-level offenses. Some of those participating in the campaign stand with me today, and you will hear from them shortly. We will preview 2 videos from that campaign that we intend to post on our social media over the next few weeks. Lastly, let me just express my gratitude, again, for the University of Maryland for their work on this report, and I plan to fully implement their recommendations. And with that, I will allow, in a moment, turn it over to Brian Johnson, but I want you all to be able to preview 2 of the campaign videos, one from Mr. Josh Hatch and the other from Ms. Gwen Farmer.
Chairman of the Caucus of African American Leaders Public Safety Committee. We know that in Baltimore City, the war on drugs has been a war on black people. That's why we support new approaches that decriminalize drug possession and allow police and prosecutors to focus more on serious crime. Drug users need help and support, not arrest and incarceration. We must end the failed war on drugs and pursue a strategy that emphasizes public health. Justice is equal application of the law, irrespective of one's race, religion, or creed.
My name is Gwen Farmer, and I lost my son in 2017 in Baltimore City. And for the last 5 years, I've been a client of the Victims Witness program with the State's Attorney's Office. I was with them during the trial. They supported me, and I've been continuing on with them. They've been providing counseling services. They had one person that came to court with me every time. She came to court with me every time. Even went down to the detective. The detective and the state's attorney, they were in like close contact with each other. It's important for the state's attorney's office to have a victim assistance program because it just provides the necessary support that victims have, because a lot of times, like, the victims are like they're going through a lot. They're frustrated, they angry, they tired, they act that they can't see clear, they can't focus, and one thing, and what they do is they just kind of help you get organized. They console you, and they help you figure out like the next steps in the process and what you need to do. Justice to me is equality, fairness and opportunity.
I'm going to turn it over to Brian Johnson.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say those videos are powerful, and I think they put a human face to the issues that we're studying in this report, which are overall statistical patterns. But it's important to not forget, as a researcher and just as part of the public, that these are real people's lives that we're talking about. Overall, democratic principles of fair and just treatment are core values in the American justice system, which is why it's concerning that racial disparities are all too common. Defendants of color are overrepresented across many stages of the justice system, from arrest to pretrial detention, to conviction to imprisonment. And communities of color are also subject to higher rates of violent crime and violent victimization. The importance of examining disparities has been heightened even more by recent events, including the police killings of unarmed black citizens, public protests over racial justice, and the impact of social movements like Black Lives Matter. So it's against this backdrop that the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, led by Ms. Marilyn Mosby, agreed to participate in a collaborative researcher-practitioner partnership with the University of Maryland and also researchers at Harvard University to do a deep dive on issues of racial inequality in different decisions related to the prosecutor's office. So the report that came out today, or that's going to be released today, is a detailed analysis of case management data from the state's attorney's office, looking at all circuit court cases disposed of during 2017 and 2018. And I won't go through all the key findings. We'll make the report public after this press conference. But I want to highlight a few things. The study does a detailed statistical analysis looking at the relationship between defendant race and several different kinds of outcomes, including case dispositions, charging decisions, and sentencing outcomes in circuit court cases. Some of the key findings are that compared to the proportion in the population, black defendants are overrepresented in circuit court cases. On average, they tend to face more serious criminal charges, especially in firearm and drug cases, and they have more significant criminal histories. However, after we account for all of these kinds of case factors and other kinds of background factors in our multivariate statistical analysis, we find that there are only small racial differences in most of the case outcomes related to the prosecutor's office. In particular, black defendants are slightly less likely to be convicted, less likely to plead guilty, but when we look at average outcomes in terms of sentences, we find very few differences for black and white defendants. So overall, the report concludes that the general pattern of results does not suggest overarching or systemic patterns of racial disparity in the specific decisions of the prosecutor's office in Baltimore City Circuit Court cases, but we do identify a number of different potentially important policy implications of the findings, as well as data improvements and other future directions for research. So let me just conclude by thanking Ms. Mosby and her office for taking the very important steps to agree to participate in this kind of transparent research process, and I think in taking other steps to address issues of racial justice head-on in prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks so much.
All right, Colby.
Good morning. We want to start by thanking Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby for her courage and her commitment to challenging the racist status quo in the criminal justice system. We should be clear, this is the big story. Mackenzie, Tim, you all need to be reporting about how every aspect of life in this city is impacted by the institutional racism in the criminal justice system. There are too many black people in jail. I'm grateful to the researchers for coming forward with the data and the analysis that confirm what we've known for decades. There are too many black people in jail in Maryland. And what that looks like is, it looks like fathers and mothers who aren't able to be at home with their children. It looks like fathers and mothers who aren't able to participate in parent-teacher organizations and in school settings. It looks like black people who are not able to compete in the business ecosystem. It looks like black people who are removed from the workforce. It looks like black voters who are denied the opportunity to elect elected officials who will promulgate anti-racist policies that truly create democracy. One of the implications of this report is that democracy is significantly debilitated when there is an uneven application of the law. You need to report that. So we're grateful for the state's attorney putting forward the Many Faces of Justice initiative. We are hopeful that State's Attorney Mosby's courage and her commitment will be a signal to prosecutors in Maryland's other 23 jurisdictions, to prosecutors in the Attorney General's office, and to prosecutors at the federal level, from Merrick Garland to Eric Barron. It is time for us to see an end to the anti-democratic, unjust, immoral practices that have led to so many African Americans being incarcerated in Maryland and such a disproportionate application of the law on black communities in Baltimore and across this state and across this country. We're grateful to each of you for coming out and covering this very important story. Thanks again to the researchers and to the other members of the community who have had first-hand experience with the disproportionate application of law. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert?
My name is Robert Morgan. I'm here at the behest of the Public Safety Chairman of the Caucus of African American Leaders, Mr. Joshua Hatch. You saw him in the video. And I'm here to express on behalf of the committee and the caucus that we stand unswervingly behind Madam State's Attorney and her innovative and foresighted approach to delving into the deep problems that plague this city and our state with regard to racial disparity, violence, and criminal justice. No one here feels that if they've been treated unfairly, that's okay. It's not. Justice is imperative, but justice, as she's outlined in her presentation, has many faces. There are different aspects of the problem. Some get more attention than others. But we believe that her willingness to use the power of her office, the data that exists, and the observations that have long been made about racial disparities that are unjust and unnecessary have led us to believe that she is going to bring about changes and has brought about changes by linking policies to observations. Observations alone are not going to do it. And I want to just harken back for you for one thing that has unfolded in our history in Maryland. There was a commission on black males that was established in 1993 by the Honorable and late Elijah Cummings. He brought together one of the most diverse committees that have ever existed legislatively in the history of Maryland. Black, white, all religious denominations, preachers and prisoners, collaborating to get to the root causes of this. And as a harbinger, he said this: if we don't deal with these problems today, they will haunt us and become exacerbated tomorrow. This report validates that, and we have the dubious distinction of Maryland surpassing Mississippi in housing more African American people and for longer periods of time than anywhere else in the nation. That's not troubling to a progressive place like Maryland than it needs to be. And so we support her policies, we support her inquiries into these areas, we support things that don't seem popular at first instance, but as later down the line we've shown these things matter and they make a difference in a meaningful way in all of our lives. And so we want to thank her for her service, and we want to indicate to her we have your back. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. All right, Ms. Daphne.
Good morning. Ironically, I'm standing here on the day of my son's birthday. He would have been 36 today. But I'm standing here in a press conference. Thank God for Miss Marilyn Mosby, who has given me a voice to what's happening with our black youth and our black men in the state of Maryland, who again are affected by these bad policies and all. And these policies and these negative injections that you have put on our young black boys turn them to angry young men who take it out on each other, unfortunately, because they don't know what to do with that displaced pain that has been given to them on this criminal justice system. Now, I'm not standing up here taking up for the person who took my son's life, but how can a young man, 16 and 17 years old, been brought up on a bad system that think that's normal because they don't see any justice, anything for them when they go to court for something small and end up making that a life sentence where they can't get a job or they can't finish their school and everything. The pain, it just reflects back and forth, back and forth. And I'm staying here today and saying these policies in the state of Maryland have to change if we want to see change. And as a mother of a murdered son, please don't take lightly that our son is and our daughters are dead, and it's just over right there. Thank you, Miss Marilyn Mosby, for giving us a voice. For the rest of you don't even care about our children being murdered. 300 and some a year, and that's just in the city. You forget about Harford County, the state. I live in Harford County. I never met my prosecutor, state's attorney, for 14 years. I've been dealing with them for 14 years and still haven't had an answer to what happened to my son. Same with the other 7 families out there. We don't get to see a courtroom. We don't know what happened to our children, and they don't see that we need to know. All they want to do is lock young black boys up for selling drugs to their Caucasian children. They don't care about our sons being murdered. I don't even know what a courtroom looked like. Oh, yes, I do. My oldest son, they gave him 20 years for selling drugs in Harford County at an age of 19 years old. I know what it looks like. Me and about 50 other black mothers go downstairs to see our sons getting the sentence while the Caucasian kids is going upstairs to a courtroom where they stand up there and say why they use drugs with their BMWs and their Mercedes and their parents with fine clothes on standing in the courtroom, and we all upstairs. They begging the judge, please don't put my daughter's son in jail, and the judge is saying, okay, I'm going to give him one more chance. We stand up there as parents, and our children go up there and ask for another chance for their lives, and they stole 20 years sentences out the window like it's written like it's supposed to get. These things, these challenges and these things have to stop. And again, I want to thank Miss Marilyn Mosby for being that voice. I come up from Harford County, but I represent parents all around the state of Maryland. In all these fine counties, we do not have a voice. None of us black parents have a voice in these counties. So I want to state to Miss Marilyn Mosby, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This tear I have, one for my son, and one for the public who doesn't understand that these policies must change. Thank you.
Questions?
Is there any specific thing the office is going to do, policy the office is going to do in response to the findings of the report?
I think we've already, even before the findings of the report, have attempted to address these disparities within the criminal justice system, and that's been reflective of our policies. So whether it's the marijuana policy or whether it's the COVID policies that we made permanent, we understood that these policies disproportionately impact people of color and have a negative sort of implication for communities and law enforcement. And so we'll continue to create policies that will ensure equity in the criminal justice system and that we can address the disparity in a way in which we are addressing the needs of the individuals that we represent every day. So yes, we've done it even before the publishing of this report. We will continue to do so as well. Yes.
I think you mentioned it was last year that DPD brought you 5 marijuana arrests and dismissed them all. Does that, in your mind, kind of prove that you and DPD are on the same page and they're responsive to your policy changes?
So what I will say is, I was one of the first prosecutors in this country to come out and say we're not prosecuting marijuana possession. Why? Because there's no disparity among white and black people when it comes to use, but there's a clear disparity when it comes to the way that it is imposed and enforced against black and brown people. One of the things that we knew nationally is that mere possession, no disparity among white and black, but you're, as a black person in this country, you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana. In the city of Baltimore, according to the ACLU report, you're 6 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana. And even after we decriminalized 10 grams or less of marijuana, where police officers were responsible for issuing citations, 42% of the citations that they were issuing came in 1 out of 9 police districts, which happens to be 95% black and disproportionately impoverished. And what I've been very clear about in my approach to all of our policies is that as a state's attorney, utilizing my discretion and my power, is that I will never be complicit in the discriminatory enforcement of laws against poor Black and brown people.
I have an on-topic question as well as an off-topic question.
You can save the off-topic. We're going to do on-topic first, okay?
So on-topic, can you explain the timeline of the video, when was I know the report looked at 2017
Yep.
to 2018. Can you explain the timeline of when you decided to move forward with doing this video and this campaign and this press release? It seems, pretty glossy and this.
Glossy?
Can you just talk about the timeline?
Sure, the timeline is this. We started doing this and we made a decision that we were going to do this in 2019, right? So this is 2021. That was 2020, 2021, 2 years ago. We made a decision that we were going to do and look into these policies. And we partnered with UMD in order to do so. And so this is the publication of the data from 2017 to 2018, because clearly in 2020, we had the global pandemic, which impacted the data and would have skewed the data. And so this is now the publishing of that report. They finalized it, and we're now announcing it to the city of Baltimore.
When was the report? Is there someone who can talk about how early the report was published, or when was it
It's being published now, right? They are looking at data from 2017 through 2018, because that's representative of what we actually typically do, not in a COVID year.
I'm sorry, the
Come on.
report was just finished. It takes time to
That's just what I'm
to
getting.
get
You
the
can
data.
come up. You want to come up, Brian?
No, it's okay. It just takes time to get the data to clean it,
I'm
to
concerned
analyze it.
about-
So that's the timeline.
Okay. That's fine.
Mackenzie, I'm concerned about the implications of the question. So I want to go back to what I said earlier. This is a significant story. This is not new news, however. There have been too many Black people in jail for hundreds of years in this country. With the elimination of slavery in this country, there was a period of Reconstruction. Immediately following that period of Reconstruction, which ended because there was a tie in the presidential election, and the compromise was to remove the federal troops from the South, which was the enforcement component to make sure that all Americans had their civil rights protected as guaranteed under the Constitution. When those federal troops were removed, we saw the people who betrayed this country, who committed treason, come back into power. And then they passed a series of laws called the Black Codes, which made it illegal to stand around, essentially made it illegal not to have a job, made it illegal for Black people to do all manner of things that normal people do all of the time. That was a violation of the Constitution, and it returned a situation where Black people were placed in bonds. So many of the Black people, for example, who were arrested for vagrancy were then sent to prison plantations like the one that you might find in Angola, Louisiana, doing the exact same thing that they were doing when they were forcibly enslaved by white supremacists, right? And so there is an uninterrupted chain. And so in this former slave state, Maryland, we still see that while Black people are 30% of the population, we are 70% of the people who are incarcerated in prison. This is not about timing of a report. It is not about timing of an initiative. It is not whether or not the people who put forth the report and the initiative do it in a manner that is professional and looks good. We don't expect mediocrity from our elected officials. But what we do expect is for our elected officials to root out corruption. And there is no greater corruption. And we expect the press to report corruption. There is no greater corruption than the deprivation of human rights. There is no greater corruption than the deprivation of constitutional rights. And we expect you all to get this story right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
One more on topic. You mentioned a figure, I think it was 2014-15, roughly 3,900 people incarcerated in Baltimore City. And 552 in 2021, is that the general population, or is that the number of people that you sentenced to, or not that you, but that were sentenced to prison sentences in that time span?
That was a jail population.
Okay.
Jail population. Any other questions? Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Can we do off topic?
Sure. I can take it off topic.
I mean, you were asked yesterday, but have you made a decision on filing for re-election?
So again, what I said yesterday is still true today. I'm focused on running my office. You know, the people of Baltimore City elected me to carry out my term. My term doesn't end until 2022. And that's where my focus is, coming out of a global pandemic and ensuring that we are holding violent individuals accountable, right? And ensuring that we're breaking down barriers of distrust, making sure that we're prioritizing victims' rights. And that's what we're doing every single day. You got an awesome opportunity to see some of my talented prosecutors yesterday and see some of the convictions that we're maintaining despite the court closures and a global pandemic. And so that's where my focus is. I run an office of 403 employees, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to do. I won't be distracted by anything else.
You talk about trust. Yesterday there was a survey that showed 98% of people said that they don't think that you should run for re-election. It appears there's a lack of trust among people in the community that you have been elected to serve. Are you confident that if you do decide to run, that you could regain that trust among people and perhaps win?
So I'm not familiar with your survey, and the only thing I would say is that the people of Baltimore have spoken twice. They've reelected me twice, despite the naysayers and the haters and the individuals that try to put out misinformation about our city being in crisis. I can tell you that those individuals have faith in me and my ability to run an office of 403 employees and to bring accountability to violent individuals. That's what we're doing. That's what we'll continue to do. And I'll just let that be where it is.
Can I say something, Marilyn?
I just have one. I'm sorry. The people have spoken twice. You said winning re-election. That happened before you were federally indicted.
Okay.
Do you
I
think
get
it
that.
changes?
And so what I will say, let me just be very clear, that I will not be distracted by any of the noise. The people of Baltimore City have spoken twice, and they will speak again. And I'm going to stay focused on my job. And that's what I'm elected to do, and I'll continue to do so. Ms. Daphne, did you want to say anything?
Yes, hi. Let me speak, especially to the media. I'm a mother of a murdered son who's been affected. I don't know if any of you have been affected. Let us have our time so somebody can hear our voices, what's wrong, what has happened with our children in our community, and stop injecting your work into the hearts of these moms and fathers who have lost their children to homicide, okay? I understand you do a good job for your job, and I appreciate that. I spoke to you about that first. But this is my time right now. I took off work. Like I said, today's my son's birthday. I could have been sitting at the cemetery, or I preferred to be ordering him a cake and some ice cream. Please stop injecting in our communities the pain that we have, using it for propaganda to get Emmy Awards, because I'm tired of it. Nobody ever calls us to sit down with us and see how we really feel and how we can help to change the statistics in our community stuff with our young black people. So we come to the media to do that. Don't take me for granted, please. I'm not just up here standing. I got a hole in my heart bigger than you ever could feel. So we have these, we're trying to change the trajectory of the city. You guys make nobody want to move here. You're messing up. My friends, they sell property, they sell real estate. Who wants to look at their news every day and see the blight of a city where people live at? My mother lives in the city. All the city is not indicative of this crime and all. There's great people that live in the city. There's a small amount of people who were never taken care of properly, weren't schooled properly, and all that, this causing all this. It's not indicative of the whole city. And I'm speaking from the whole state. The people that's in charge, before we want something done before it gets to the criminal justice system, before it gets to the state's attorney office. So don't take that lightly, what we're trying to do. Is that clear? Thank you.
We will not be exploited. Any other questions? Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, guys.
If I got a chance to meet you, Brian Johnson, but I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Very well spoken.
Mackenzie, let me remind you that people are innocent until proven guilty. That is spelled out very clearly in the Constitution, right?
I get it.
And so, if you use that same determination that you use on these points,